everyone, and welcome back to our series Under the Influence, where I'm introducing you to 3 different Greek words that help us understand how the Holy Spirit interacts with us and relates to us. And last time we talked about epipipto, and that word really talked about what has come over you. That the Holy Spirit, when he comes over us, he brings an influence and a change into our lives. And hopefully more and more we begin to see the Holy Spirit's influence in our lives. Today, I want to introduce you to probably my favorite word of all time. Not just Greek word, but even English word. I think it's lovely to say, but the meaning is even better. But before I introduce you to that word, let me talk about 2 things: in crowds and plot twists. So I don't know whether you've ever been part of an in crowd, or maybe you've been on the outside of the in crowd. In crowds tend to be, the people that dress the same way. They are the cool group, or the group that seems to be successful, or the group that has stuff. And there's this wee in crowd, and they're in schools, they're in workplaces, they can be in just groups of friends. Oh, dare I say, they can even sometimes be found in churches. And even sometimes spiritually, we consider in crowds, and maybe subconsciously, we do think of those who are outside. And we think of those who have made it, and those who have got it, and those who have a certain way about them, and God would really move in their lives. That in crowd. And then sometimes we think of those who are outside. And sometimes we think we're in the in crowd. And sometimes we consider ourselves to be on the outside of the outskirts. Secondly, think about plot twists. Whenever I think of plot twists, and I'm a disclaimer here, going to be a ruiner, but if you haven't watched this film yet, I'm not sure where you've been. But in The Sixth Sense, where the little boy realizes that Bruce Willis is dead, I don't know about you, that was a mic drop moment for me. I was like, what? And it explained an awful lot. And maybe even as part of your icebreaker together, you want to talk about different plot twists that have been in books or films or stories that you've seen. So let's consider those ideas: in crowds and plot twists. So when Jesus was ministering on the earth, there was definitely an in crowd. In Jerusalem and in Israel at that stage, there were Pharisees and Sadducees, there were teachers of the law, there were people who were very much part of the religious in crowd. They considered themselves to be in the in crowd, and even those outside considered them to be in the in crowd. And Jesus often bumped heads with these people, and there was conflict between these people because Jesus didn't always just mix with the in crowd. In fact, Jesus had a heart for those who were on the outskirts, the outsiders, the unlikelies. Jesus sat with what they accused him of: sinners and publicans and tax collectors. And Jesus was very often defending his mission to these people, because Jesus has a heart not just for the in crowd, but actually for the outsider and the unexpected and the unlikelies. And so Jesus begins in Luke 15 to tell some stories to try and explain his mission, to try and explain to the in crowd, hey, do you know these people actually matter, and they matter to God, and here's how much they matter to God. And so he tells a number of different stories. He talks about the parable of the lost sheep and how the shepherd will go and he will look for that one out of the 99. He tells the story of the lost coin and how the woman will turn her house upside down to find that coin. And when she finds it, she celebrates. And then he tells a story. He tells a story of a young man who decides to leave his home. Now, everybody listening, they understand a lot of the cultural contexts that are found within this story. And this young man, he tells his dad he wants his inheritance early. He's basically saying, Dad, I'd rather you were gone. I want your money, not you. And so he runs away to a far off land. He spends the money. He ends up bankrupt. There's a famine in the land. We know the story so well. It's the story of the prodigal son. And he finds himself feeding pigs, which again would have got gasps and shock and horror amongst the people who were listening, and very likely the in crowd were going, well, serves him right. That's his just of desserts. That's what he should be doing. Do you know, he's hit rock bottom, and rightly so, and may more judgment fall on him. I'm sure that was their heart and their attitude within as Jesus was telling the story. But then there's a plot twist, because the son comes to his senses, and the son's coming home. And again, there's so much to this story that we don't have time necessarily to talk into. But Jesus, he brings this amazing plot twist. He's coming home. And they're expecting the crowd, the in crowd, they're expecting more judgment, more wrath, more get out of here, more the townspeople gathering around and even possibly putting this young man to death for his sinfulness and for his rebellion and the way that he has treated the Father. And yet Jesus tells a story with a plot twist that again would have got oohs and ahs and amazement within the crowd as Jesus says that the Father runs towards the Son who has the prepared speech, the Son who's ready to be a slave in his Father's home. And here's what it says in Luke 15. And it says, verse 20, so he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. It's not just beautiful. I just love that. But in behind those words that we have just read, threw his arms around him and kissed him, is this beautiful Greek word. And it's the Greek word epipipto. Epipipto. Now, you say, well, we're on a series of the Holy Spirit. Why would you mention that tonight? Well, the same writer, Luke also writes the book of Acts. And it's amazing that Luke begins to tell a story of outsiders and a plot twist and epipipto in the middle. You see, there's this group of insiders already by the time of Acts. The Holy Spirit comes in Acts chapter 2, falls on the Jewish Christians. They speak in tongues, even falls on the Samaritans. That's a big, whoa, my goodness. But they're still sort of the in crowd. They're expecting, okay, God is moving on the people of Israel and people have connections with Israel. And they didn't expect God to move amongst the Gentiles. And yet in Acts chapter 10, we find this story where Peter is asked to go to Cornelius' house. A Gentile, somebody that's got no real connection with the Jewish lineage, Jewish line. He's fully a Gentile. And through visions and prophetic words, God speaks to Peter, and Peter ends up in Cornelius' house. And Peter stands and preaches to these people. Peter, with his in crowd of the Jewish Christians, yes, we're the ones who God has moved on, the Holy Spirit has poured out upon us. And then there's this huge plot twist. Let me read it to you in Acts 10, verse 44. While Peter was still speaking these words, the Holy Spirit came on all who heard the message. Go on in verse 45. The circumcised believers who had come with Peter were astonished. Plot twist. Oh, wow, shock, horror, awe. They were astonished that the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out even on the Gentiles, for they heard them speaking in tongues and praising God. And so you have this in crowd and the outside crowd, the unlikelies, the unacceptables, the people that no one thought God would move on. And yet this plot twist right in the middle. What's the plot twist? Well, it's interesting. The word that Luke uses is the same word that he uses in Luke chapter 5 for the Father hugging and embracing his Son. Notice there, verse 44, while Peter was still speaking these words, the Holy Spirit came on. Now, in some ways, the translators haven't helped us here, but that's the same word. It's epipipto. The Holy Spirit fell on and embraced. And let me use this term for epipipto. It's a grace embrace. It's an embrace to those who were unexpected, those who are unlikely, those who aren't part of the in crowd, those who thought it would never be me, those who others thought it would never be them. And yet the Holy Spirit comes on them in the same way the Father comes and embraces the Son, so the Holy Spirit embraces the Gentiles. So let me talk to you. You see, some of us might feel like we're in the in crowd and we've grown up with all of this and that feels great. Happy days. But not everybody does. Some people feel, even whenever it comes to the Holy Spirit, that we're part of the outside group, the unlikelies, hey, I know God would use them and God would touch them and the Holy Spirit would do something powerful in their lives, but not necessarily mine. Well, can I tell you today, God is into plot twists. God is into epipipto. And his desire is that the Holy Spirit would come in epipipto, the grace embrace, that he would come on those who even feel themselves that they are unlikely, unacceptable, and in many ways, hey, I'm on the outside of this. His desire is to bring you on the inside, to pour out his Spirit. He has a desire that you would encounter today, epipipto, the grace embrace. Have fun discussing my favorite word today. God bless you.